Hi, my name is Gáspár Nagy, and this is a SpecSync for MTM demo. In this video, I will demonstrate how you can synchronize SpecFlow scenarios with Team Foundation Server test cases using SpecSync. Let's get started. For this demonstration, I have created a simple SpecFlow project, which is basically a calculator example. I have added two feature files there. One contains a simple scenario, and the other contains a scenario with a data table in there and a scenario outline. I have also created an empty Visual Studio Team System project. Basically, it's just a simple project with a product backlog item and a bug, and on the test section, it's nearly empty. I just created a test suite for our demonstration. First, we would like to create test case work items for our scenarios, in our case 3 test cases, with all the content synchronized. To achieve that, we will use the SpecSync for MTM synchronization tool, which is released as a NuGet package. So first we have to add the NuGet package to our project. For that, I just open the packages settings. You can see that currently only the basic SpecFlow packages are installed. Go to the Browse section and type in SpecSync. The latest version of SpecSync is listed, so I can just install it to my project. The package contains the synchronization tool that we have to run. However, to make the execution a little bit easier, the package also added a batch script, a CMD file to our project. This script does nothing more than finds the executable and runs it with the parameters that we have provided. So let's see how it works. For that, I will open a Visual Studio command prompt. Any command prompt would work, where I'm currently standing on the solution folder. You can see the solution file, the packages folder there. To run the synchronization tool, I need to step into the folder where our feature files are stored, so basically the specs project folder in our case. And now I can call the synchronization tool. Let's see it first without any parameters. Running the tool without any parameters are basically showing all the different options that you can use. You can find the detailed description of all the different options in the documentation. Right now what we are interested in is the TFS URL option, which you can use to specify the TFS or Visual Studio Team System project that we would like to synchronize with. So I will run the tool again, now with the TFS URL option. To find the right URL to be used here, we can go back to the web interface of the TFS project and just copy the base URL from there. This is basically starting from the HTTPS until the project name. Sometimes there is a project collection in between. In our case, there are no explicitly mentioned project collection, so this is our URL that we have to use. And let's start the synchronization. In order to synchronize with VSTS, obviously I need to specify my credentials, and I got an interactive login dialog for that. After I have specified my credentials successfully, the synchronization starts, and as you can see, the scenarios are linked to newly created test cases. Right now these test cases are IDs starting from 3000, 3001, 3002. So these are the 3 test cases that have been created. If we go back to our project, what we can see that the scenarios and the feature file has been changed, and each individual scenario has a new tag, which is basically making the linkage between the scenario and the created test case in TFS. This modification is only necessary when you initially link the scenarios into test cases. For ongoing synchronization, the feature files are not changed. So let's have a look at the test cases in the VSTS online interface. To be able to see the test cases, I can add them to this test suite by calling the add existing option here. I need to run the query, and you can see that the 3 test cases are listed here. I have added them to this test suite. Let's open one of them. So for example, the add 2 numbers, probably you remember still. What you can see is that the different steps, the different give and when then steps of this scenario are basically synchronized to steps of the test case itself. And you can also see that the different tags that were provided on the scenario itself are basically converted to tags in TFS test case. As these test cases are now in TFS, we can do whatever we can do with the test case in TFS. So for example, we can do a manual test run for this add two numbers test case. SpecSync creates automated test cases, so there is also an option to run these scenarios, these test cases automatically, but I will show that in a different demonstration. Right now, let's just run them as a manual run. The manual test run interface has been loaded, so I can just go through the steps and verify whether they can be really performed with the real application. So let's imagine that I'm just testing them manually and just marking each individual step as I go. Once I'm finished, and if I'm happy with the result, I can just make the entire test pass and save and close the results. You can see that this result has been recorded in TFS. To be able to see the ongoing synchronization, let's make a change in the scenario itself. And for the sake of simplicity, let's just change the numbers. So instead of 50 and 70, let's just use 5 and 7, and then the addition result is supposed to be 12. So I'm just saving this file, and I would like to rerun the synchronization from the command line. And while I'm doing that, I would like to show you another feature of SpecSync. You remember that we had to add the synchronized test cases manually to test suites, but actually SpecSync can also do this for us. For that, I would need to specify a test suite option with the name of a test suite or an ID of a test suite, and SpecSync will automatically add the created test cases into that. For this demonstration, let's just specify another test suite, and SpecSync will create it for us. So let's say suite 2, for example. Let's just run the synchronization. Again, I need to authenticate myself. And then the synchronization runs. But you can see from the result that the add two numbers scenario has been updated, but the other two scenarios were not changed, so they are just up to date. You can also see that SpecSync has added 3 test cases to this newly created test suite. Let's see these in the TFS web interface. I'm just reloading the test section, and now we can see the other test suite that were just created. Test cases can be included into multiple test suites, so this is all fine. And we can also see the scenario that we just modified, and if I open that, you can see that the changes that we have done in the scenario in the feature file have been synchronized to TFS. As I said, for synchronizing ongoing changes of scenarios, you don't need to modify the feature file, so you can also include that into the build process to make it automated. Please have a look at the documentation for the details how you can include SpecSync into the build process, or check out the video that I will publish in this topic later on. Performing interactive login for the ongoing local synchronization might be inconvenient, so to improve that, what you can do, you can check out the different authentication options in the documentation that SpecSync supports. One of these options is to use the alternate credential. Alternate credential is a way to access TFS with a simple username and password. To look at these, you have to go to the security settings in the web access. And here, basically, you see the different credentials, different security options you have. Alternate authentication credentials, as I said, is basically a username and password that you can use for synchronizing the scenarios, for example. Alternate credentials are simple and easy. However, if you are looking for a more secure option, I recommend using the personal access tokens. But for this presentation, let's stick to the alternate credentials. To be able to use them, I will need to go back to my console and specify my alternate username with the user option. As I haven't specified my password there, I will need to enter it here. And with that, the synchronization is successful. For making the local synchronization easier, it makes sense to put the usual options like the TFS URL, the test suite, and so on into the CMD file that we have added to the project. I am finished, and now the TFS URL, the test suite, my username are all included into the CMD file. To avoid re-entering passwords again and again, I can also specify my password in the password option. However, it's not too good to put your password into the project repository. So instead of that, what I have done, I was just basically referring to an environment variable where I can specify my password. This way I can avoid putting passwords into the project repository. So let's see how this works. As you can see, with this you can make the ongoing local synchronization much easier. And this basically concludes our demonstration. We have seen how you can synchronize SpecFlow scenarios into TFS test cases, how to perform ongoing synchronization of changes, and how you can make your local synchronization easier by specifying all the different settings into the provided CMD file. Please have a look at the documentation for more details, and please check out the related SpecSync videos that I will provide. Thank you for watching and happy syncing!